Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Democrat politics has become legitimately insane. I'm not being facetious, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. It's become increasingly difficult to have discussions with your average leftist, this my way or the highway mentality. Everybody I disagree with is my enemy, is a literal fascist. Well, of course it goes beyond that, and now it's affecting policy, or at least policy discussions and decisions. And here we are in clown world, having to deal with emotionally unstable adult children throwing freaking hissy fits on important issues like, not irresponsibly plunging the country into further uncontrolled debt with all of this ridiculous uncontrolled spending. Let me show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so finally, I guess you could say we're at the end of the game here, heading into the ninth inning. After months of Republicans trying to have a good faith, rigorous debate on the issue of spending ahead of increasing the debt ceiling, after months of refusing to come to the table, finally, the Biden administration sends two liaisons to start debt ceiling talks with Kevin McCarthy.
Changed in this meeting was the president has now selected two people from his administration to directly negotiate with us, Steve Ricchetti and the OMB director. I will have Garrett Graves and my staff meet with them, and we've got a short time frame here to try to find out how we could come to an agreement. But look, I wish we had done this back in February. I requested then, let's sit down and meet. It took the president 97 days. He and Schumer thought people would just want to just raise the debt ceiling without looking at it. And you all know, you've heard me say this many times, this is giving your child a credit card. But they keep reaching the limit, and you have every year after year just raised the limit to a point that now you can't afford it. Shouldn't you look at how you spend your money?
Now, I don't want to get into too deep of a policy discussion. I know there's a lot of people who are advocating for no increase in the debt ceiling. Default if you got a default. That's what happens when you run a massive debt that you can't pay. I understand different perspectives. I personally don't want to get into the weeds on that. Personally, I don't even know where I stand just yet on this issue. But even with that being said, I do agree that there has to be a stop, and a hard stop, a real 180 turn to this totally irresponsible increase in debt and reckless spending. This never-ending compiling of debt. But without delving into the policy, we gotta focus on the reality of Washington and what's going on. Republicans may not be taking a super hardline stance, but at least they're using their leverage in the House to stop the reckless spending to a certain extent. They're calling for budget cuts, and they're also proposing budget cuts. The Biden administration has taken such a ridiculous partisan stance, and they've done nothing over the last couple of months but spread misinformation, totally misrepresent the situation, demonizing Republicans in the public eye by threatening an economic crisis. Republicans are simply doing what always happens in Washington. They're calling for discussions, a debate, possible compromise. There's a history of this happening in Washington, especially on this issue. Even Joe Biden has advocated for spending cuts during Republican administrations, meeting in the middle and having to compromise when it comes to spending proposals.
How can you explain this? How can you explain the fact that grown men and women are unwilling to budge up till now, and still some of them are still unwilling to budge, by taking an absolute position, my way or no way? That's not governing. That's no way to govern. You can't govern that way. This is a cycle. I predict to you that a lot of those new members who came here with my way or the highway, they'll either be on the highway or they'll learn that they have to have compromise.
Yet this time the standard is different, and the standard is different specifically, let's go back to the point of the video from the intro, because leftists are completely insane. Joe Biden's spreading all kinds of misinformation, pretending as if he's a fiscally responsible president, and he's been reducing the deficit. It's complete nonsense. Just his plans so far are already slated to add $17 trillion to the national debt in the next 10 years. I'm pulling that number off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. Spending in Washington has become so inflated, so crazy, and that's because Democrats find themselves in this very odd position of having to cater towards the radical left. The Democrat Party is becoming a communist party, or at least a quasi-socialist party, depending on how far they go down that line. And now Joe Biden and other top Democrats have no choice but to propose reckless government expanding policies and spending proposals, pretty much or else. That's why it took so long. Joe Biden was always going to come to the table and end up, finding a compromise. He's literally forced to, but he has to wait to the last second, because if he simply says the word compromise, if he simply arrives at the table for discussion, well then this happens. Far left squad threatens Biden not to make major concessions on debt ceiling. We have made it clear that if they give on those core democratic values, there will be huge backlash, she said, adding that there will be backlash at the polling booth as far left voters won't bother to show up. And what she means by democratic values is expansive government and socialist programs being ramrodded through the legislative process by any means necessary. Ah, such democracy. I feel like it's a pretty common sense stance, it's a common sense perspective to not want to plunge the country further into uncontrolled, never-ending debt. But the far left perspective, their democratic value, is that there shouldn't even be a discussion. Our way or the highway. Either you support us or you're a terrible fascist because you don't support our communist revolution. These people are crazy, and Joe Biden knows it. He knows that if he says we're going to work with Republicans, find a compromise and come to an agreement in government spending, he knows that if he does that, the far left is going to go insane. That's why it took him so long to do the whole student loan forgiveness package, because he knew that it wasn't going to work. He knew that he would never have the votes to do it officially, and that he didn't have the executive power to do it, and that most likely it would get stopped or at least challenged in the court system. He waited and waited until right before the 2022 midterms and dropped it right ahead of the election, essentially using it as a vote-buying grift to get young voters to show up. He promised young voters $10,000 to $20,000 as a bribe to vote for the Democrat Party. Democrat governance and Democrat policies aren't responsible ones. They're not policies that account for, reality, numbers, results, performance, whatever it is, economic and financial well-being of citizens. No, leftist policies are generally empty marketing tactics to either buy votes, get votes, or appease an absolutely insane, ignorant, pseudo-intellectual academic mob. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants you to believe that it's irresponsible and undemocratic to challenge her will. Give me a freaking break. The only thing that's irresponsible is not coming to the table, not acknowledging the fact that ballooning the national debt to over $40 trillion by 2030 is completely insane and not sound policy. Republicans aren't the greatest. Conservative politicians and conservative parties across the Western world in general kind of follow this trend, but at least they represent a small glimmer of sanity. At least just a little bit. You're $2 million in debt, your expenses continue to pile up, everything's getting more expensive. The Democrats are telling you just get another credit card. Put a credit card in your spouse's name or your child's name and just run up a debt because everything is a human right. And the Republicans are telling you, hey, stop spending, stupid. You're making things worse and you're gonna ruin your child's financial future. One side sounds great, just ignore all responsibility. You're entitled to everything. Consequences be damned. It sounds great. I'd love to live in that frickin' fairy tale, but it's not real. It's a scam. Democrats are living in fantasy world, and the other side, conservatives, are operating in this very interesting novel space. The realm of basic reality and common sense. You leftoids are insane. Nothing else to say, that's the thesis. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Of course, you know that we'd love to have you here. Thanks for watching, folks, and I'll see you on the next one.